A very good morning, friends. It's truly a privilege to stand here today and share my great experience of association with Edelgive. I'd like to start with a bit of background about myself. And interestingly, about 11 years ago, when I retired, I'm 71 today, and I turned 60, I finished my tenure with working for a multinational company. And I remember the dialogue I had with my chairman in the US when he wanted me to continue for 2 more years after 60. And I told him, Herb, you know, I've spent 40 years in the corporate world. I'm 60. Inshallah, I've got another 15, 20 years of runway left. You take 2 years away from that, you're taking about 20% of my time. So will you please let me go? Because I had some plans in my mind. And these plans were basically on a fundamental belief that magic lies outside the comfort zone. So I was very determined that when I finished my corporate life, I'll not go back to corporate life. I'll not start a new company. I'll not go into consultancy. I'll be associated in some form, but I want to see some other part of this world, and that's where the magic is, and that's the social sector. I knew nothing about it. And in my 40 years of corporate life, I've enjoyed living outside my comfort zone, so this was nothing new. So that's really how I looked at the corporate sector when I turned 60. Interestingly, it's a very large space, and where do you want to play? You know, it's in the management language, where you want to play, and how do you win? And I was very clear, and some background, that I was born in 1947 in Karachi. Okay, I'm a Sindhi, born in Karachi. We fled, I don't remember when and how. It's about 3 months old. But I've spent from 48 January till today in this country. I am what I am because the country embraced me and gave me whatever is required to make myself what I am today. And I thought I need to give back. And there's nothing that stares at anyone but is the power of the demographic dividend of this country that each one of us needs to nourish and protect. And I said, can I join the movement to protect the demographic dividend of this country? I'm calling it as a movement because tremendous work is going on in this space. Individually, you can't do anything. Collectively, there's a tremendous power, and I decided to join that movement. And that's how, when I looked at the whole education canvas, it was very interestingly on segmentation, I found that rural education, where private schools are not able to go and are going to depend continuously on government schools, can I intervene there? But in the primary education, what can I do? So I carved out my where to play space. Okay? Now the question is, how do you play in that space? How do you win in that space? Now naturally, when you get into this area, I traveled a bit into these villages. And one thing which struck me very, very dominant, you enter a village, you see a beautiful temple on one side, and you see a school in shambles. And I say, here's a community in that village making sure that every carving in the temple is perfect, that every corner is painted, is cleaned. Why is it this attitude towards a school of a community? And that's where I felt that if something is done with the community, change can take place. You can do things with the education system, but community becomes very important. These were some of my initial pickup. And I had some friends who were in the space, and they said, yes, I think go in there. My biggest confidence of entering this space, I must say, is the fact that there was so much knowledge lying around of the work being done. I felt, wow, I understand nothing of it, but there's so much knowledge, I can integrate it. So whether you beg, borrow, or steal, you put this together, you're able to do great things. So I had no fear of that. So I sat down to write down some 8 or 9 principles on which I will build this. Now, unfortunately, I've got about 15 minutes. I've got to make sure I stay within that. But this is just such a subject that I may a couple of minutes overrun. But let me walk through some of these principles. I think these principles of my 35, 38, 40 years in the corporate world, as Rashish was saying, there's a very close semblance between what you do in the social sector and the corporate. It's no different. Some of the corporate principles become very important in the social sector, and that I think I was privileged to have had experience of. So first thing, principle was that you study the system of education and see which are the levers in the system that can make that big magic change, which are the big ones. And I think it took me a long time to study this to determine that what are those systemic changes that will make the big change happen. That was point number one. Principle, I must search for that. Second is that working with the government system and the community will only give you scale and sustainability. It will not come otherwise. I talked to you about the temple and the school. My third part was, what do I do in that space? And it came out very clear that I think NGOs and people with experience and knowledge need to innovate in order to make the system change. But let the system be the carrier of the change. This was the third principle. Most important, I felt, as a good principle was, if I'm doing innovation, I must do this at my own cost. And I carved out, God has been kind, a bit of a budget for myself for 2 years, and I said, if I don't prove this innovation, I'm not going to go to any funder. That was my third principle. My fourth principle was that even if I went to a funder, I wanted to make sure that the donor or the funder, my partner, sees education the way we see it. I've had many friends from the corporate world saying, Daljit, here is 20 lakhs, come to Aurangabad, here are 10 schools, will you fix it? I said, no, I'm not a fixer. I've got a much larger agenda. I turned down 20 lakhs. It's a lot of money. The point I'm trying to make is that your dream, you cannot lose your focus on. So, and I'll come to this part as to my entire association with Edelgave, how it began. Nagma made a brief mention of it. Let me finish the principles. My next principle was very clearly that we must be outcome driven. We make a lot of effort, but we must be outcome driven. And there were three criteria which the corporate world taught me: quality, speed, and cost. You can't ignore these three things. If I'm going after something, I must know how to measure quality of learning of children, my assessment. If today I'm making a change, this year, my cycle time is 5 years for change. 3 years later, it must come down to 2.5 years cycle for change. If my cost of converting a school is costing me about 50,000 rupees per year, why can't it become 3,000 rupees per year? I think this became a very critical guiding principle for me. Fourth important point, which my team curses me for, I'm very, very strict about fitness. You know, this journey in the social sector, unlike the corporate sector, is a journey which is in perpetuity. It doesn't stop. It's a journey where today, it's like in the running language, it's like running a comrades. And it just goes on. If your fitness factor is not there, you give up. You require agility, tenacity, resilience in order to play in this space if you want impact. So fitness is very, very important where I'm concerned as a guiding principle for my team. Last but not the least, don't lose focus. These were the set of principles on which I began this journey in 2011-12. Between 2012 and 2018, which is 6 years we spent, we are a fledgling startup, I would say, compared to many in this room and many outside the room. I would say there are 3 milestones which I remember distinctly, which has brought us up to this point. First milestone, 2013, as Nagma mentioned, I walked into the Edelgave office through a friend who introduced me, and I said, this is my dream. Okay, I don't know how to get there, I feel that with my experience and the team that I'm putting together, because I'm a great believer in the team does it. It's a cliched statement, but I genuinely practice, and I believe I've been successful at that. So I said, here's my dream. 2 years, this is what I brought up to. These initial things tell me this will work. I put my own money into it. Would you like to participate? I remember very clearly both Nagma and Vidya saying, yes, we've never done rural education, I remember, but we'd like to come and see what you're doing. So we went to Khet Shivapur, they came down from Bombay, we went there, and I said, you have a look at what we're doing. I was amazed at the speed. At the end of the meeting in Khet Shivapur, Vidya said, we've never entered, but looking at what you want to do, I bet that you will do it. The type of instantaneous decision and the fact that the trust, which is most important, that just go ahead and do it. And I remember that's the first marker in my last 6-year journey. Second marker I had was because working with the government and I innovate something, does the government understand what this innovation means? It's like a customer. I say, I've got a damn good product. I've got to get this tested by the customer, and the customer is no other than the government. I was very fortunate in 2014, Ashwini Bhire, who was the Principal Secretary Education, I requested her to visit Khet Shivapur and see the work that we were doing. She agreed. 3 hours over there, she said, Daljit, I like what you're doing, but can you please do this at a level of a block? And we went into the first small MOU with the government, and that was my first correct. That was the second marker. Third marker was when Mr. Nand Kumar, who was the Principal Secretary, in 2016 early, he came to Vele block where we were working, and he saw a significant shift in the way we build teacher capacity in a platform called the Shikshan Parishad. He'd never seen that. But we spent a lot of time to perfect that platform, which is the government platform itself. And he said, Daljit, can you please go to these 4 backward districts of Maharashtra and please introduce us there? I was very candid because I'm a great believer. You don't have management bandwidth. We've learned in the corporate world, don't commit. I didn't have the management bandwidth. I didn't have the financial bandwidth. These are 2 critical resources. And here I was knocking at Vidya's door. I said, Vidya, here's an opportunity. Here's a requirement. I can promise you only I'll be your implementing partner. But could you sign the MOU with the government and we'll take this forward? And jokingly I told her, I said, you must get another partner because the donors will not believe why a 70-year-old guy wants to do this and maybe you'll not get funds. So she listened to me, and there was Aditya joining us in this team. And I think this was the advent of 2016, and we've had this 2-year journey. So these are 3 very critical milestones we've walked through in the last 6 years. Going forward, I'm very clear I have another marker, which I call as 2022, when India turns 75 and I turn 75. Independence came in 47, I was born in 47. I believe that nature of work, I don't want to go into details, the nature of work that one is doing, the processes, the documentation, and the great team that we have between Kaivalya and Gyan Prakash Foundation, I believe we are on a threshold of creating a national technology platform for scale, for learning. Number 2, for sustainability, we are in the process today of creating a very large NGO community that is going to be bringing in whatever change we have at the village level to sustain that change. Third very important point is that whatever we have experienced in a district transformation, we're looking at a cycle time of 2.5, 3 years for district transformation. We're looking at the fact that at class 5, children have 80% plus competency. And the fact is that the cost per school per year cannot go beyond 3,000 rupees. I think we are there. That's a marker. Finally, let me share my dream. Elections are won and lost on many parameters. Inflation, food, shelter. But my dream is, maybe I'm there, I'm not there, I don't know. But my dream is that elections must be fought on education. Thank you very much.